So I got a letter when Khans of Tarkir came out. And the letter was, I love dragons. They are the most awesome thing in Magic. Why would you go to a world where all the dragons are dead? I love dragons. Why would you do that? And in my head, I'm thinking of like, you are in for such an awesome, awesome time, dragon lover.
Welcome to Seattle, home of Wizards of the Coast and Inside R&D, with me, your host, Rich Hagan. Previously, we explored the world of Fate Reforged, but now, here on Tarkir and Inside R&D, it's time, once again...
When we started design for Dragons of Tarkir, we had already, Khans of Tarkir had been in design for about 4 months. Now it's a large set, so we actually started the design for Dragons of Tarkir before Fate Reforged began. So we knew what we needed to do was we needed to make a parallel. Part of doing a time travel thing is it's the present and then the alternate present. It's 2 different timelines. So the relationship between them was very, very important. This block had a lot of the block plan was figuring out how each set reacted to the other sets.
In doing a time travel story, we knew it was going to be a lot of work. There were actually 3 world guides that were made for this block instead of 1. We had to do one for Khans of Tarkir, one for Fate Reforged, one for Dragonlords of Tarkir, to really make each of these sets unique and as rich visually and lore-wise as each previous set.
We've revisited planes before. We've gone back to Mirrodin, we've gone back to Ravnica, and we get some familiarity there. We know what has been there before, and we get to play on that. Okay, we see some old stuff, we see some new stuff, we see the world has changed. Here we were doing that, but with immediacy, that we were revisiting a plane we were actually still kind of in. So we got to play with that structure and build that structure at the same time. While Dragons of Tarkir was in design, Khans of Tarkir was still in development. We got to work both teams together to build something constructively.
Sarkhan has saved Ugin from death at the hands of Nicol Bolas, and now has returned thousands of years into the future to see his world transformed, to have that Tarkir is now the world that he's always wanted it to be. It's a world ruled by dragons.
The highlight of Dragons of Tarkir are the Dragonlords themselves. Fate Reforged has previous incarnations of them, legendary gold dragons. Now that there's 10 of them, how are we going to keep both of these cycles apart? So I pushed pretty hard that we need something, some kind of moniker to differentiate them. So there's actually 2. There's Dragonlord Atarka and legendary creature Elder Dragon, to showcase that the Dragons of Tarkir versions are evolved, they're bigger, they're better, they're more magnificent.
Dromoka is the Dragonlord that leads the clan that was once the Abzan. And you can see the visual cues that changed. In Khans of Tarkir, they have the structures that are like pyramids with the tops cut off. But in Dragons of Tarkir, those shapes have been inverted, so they're wider at the top, which is supposed to be a landing pad for dragons. That's visually one of the visual changes we were doing between Khans, Fate, and Dragons of Tarkir.
So Dragonlord Dromoka, we wanted something to embody toughness, like scales and hardship, that Dromoka could fight through anything. So that's why there's some life gain on him. You can't counter him, and you actually can't do stuff during my turn if I have the Dragonlord Dromoka. So that is our way of making a kind of stalwart Dragonlord.
One of the things that we worked on in Dragons of Tarkir is we were going to be putting dragons in each of the 5 colors. So to make them visually distinct and unique to the Dragons of Tarkir, each of them had to have a specific look. Ojutais and the Ojutai breed of dragons are feathered dragons, and it took a lot of work to get there, because could we do a dragon with feathers? Was that going to be a phoenix? I think that we ended up in a really good spot. I love the way that the Ojutai dragons look.
So Ojutai is actually one of my favorite dragons in the set. I've been a big proponent of trying the words here, like that it has hexproof while it's untapped. I feel that, you know, our players have made it pretty clear to us that hexproof can be really frustrating, but part of that is I think that there's just really no point of interaction. I feel like it's it's good that he can stay back and be a stable blocker. Like, I feel like that is one of the good things about hexproof is like, all right, I just need to stabilize. Let me keep this creature on the board to stop the swarm of creatures hitting me.
Dragonlord Silumgar embodies this idea of corpulence and corruption and vanity in the center of the jungle. He's got hordes of undead bringing him offerings and just feeding him constantly. And as a symbol, like the ultimate symbol of his vanity, he's wearing on his around his neck the preserved corpse of his one-time enemy Tassiger.
Dragonlord Silumgar, I think, is one of the more powerful dragons in the set. We had sort of been struggling to find exactly what we wanted to put on this effect. Someone had mentioned, how about if it's a big sower of temptation, and that's sort of struck a chord with me, and then it's like, but, you know, is that good enough? I actually was the one that suggested to add or Planeswalker onto that, and then at that point I felt that, yeah, that really did start to feel like a super cool mythic dragon.
Dragonlord Kolagon is another dragon I really like the look of. She's four-winged, she's also feathered. She sort of embodies the force of the dragon Tempest, and you'd see her flying over the battlefield, wings outstretched. Her breath weapon is lightning. She's radiating lightning. All of her broodlings are radiating lightning, and you can see the Kolagon warriors have these structures that come off their backs that act as lightning rods to charge them up as they ride into battle.
Her final ability is sort of an odd-looking one. It sort of stemmed from the fact that I wanted to give a feel that she, you know, that you killed things and you killed them dead, and like that they really couldn't come back if, like, you know, if you got rid of that creature, it's gone. But in terms of our color pies, black and red don't really like set the rules. Like, no, you can't play cards in your graveyard. That would be more of a white ability. So how do we do this in black and red? And then, you know, in terms of talking with the design team, well, how about if we just really, really punish you for playing a card out of your graveyard? So it's not that you can't play the card, but 10 life's a lot of life.
Dragonlord of Tarkir was always envisioned as the largest of the Dragonlords. Green-red is traditionally a pretty common color for dragons, and we knew that we wanted to really go over the top with her. Earlier versions, you know, were similarly as large, and it took us a long time to figure out exactly what we wanted her abilities to be. We didn't want her to just be humongous giant flyer. What we eventually found was that dealing damage when she entered the battlefield was the perfect way to show off just how large she was, so she could clear off the little things out of her way and only have to worry about just killing her opponent.
So we knew that we wanted to do new incarnations of the Khans, but unlike the Dragonlords, which actually kind of ascend and get better, bigger, stronger, we actually want to contrast it with the Khans that kind of get smaller and punier and more diminutive to sort of overplay this difference that now the dragons are in charge, the Khans aren't in charge. So in general, we pulled them down in colors, down in size, down in mana cost to show that the dragons rule this plane now.
Now this meant that we got to do a really cool time travel trope that, you know, is one of the classics of, oh, look how the mighty have fallen, or how this person has risen from being, you know, a good level to even a higher level. And that gave us a great storytelling opportunity to really look at who these characters were and what may have been different with them in the alternate timeline.
In Khans of Tarkir, Anafenza was the Khan of the Abzan. In Dragons of Tarkir, Dromoka has outlawed worship of the kin trees and outlawed ancestor worship. And for that, Anafenza has been executed, so she comes back as a spirit in Dragons of Tarkir.
Sidisi, in her very early form, was pretty much just as printed. It was a card that had exploit that allowed you to search up a card. This is a very evil and plotting sort of feeling card, and the whole design team latched onto it and liked it very much. When we sent it out to a larger group within the company, it was just a favorite in the company.
Zurgo Bellstriker is us kind of playing a pretty big joke on Zurgo himself, to where he's all the way down in the ranks, to where instead of going out, being the Khan, leading the charge, crushing skulls, he actually is the one that just rings the bell when trouble's around. So we thought that it would be hilarious for him to have dash but also be very small, and he has kind of this cowardly ability, the coward orc ability, where you can't block big things.
So we toyed around a lot with the different ideas for Serac in the set. One of the tricky things is we've had some very powerful cards already in standard, like including Pelucranos. So a lot of this is that we just needed to find places where this card would do things that a card like that wouldn't do. Eventually we settled upon giving all your creatures haste if you had the formidable bonus, and that could just move it into different styles of decks.
So a lot of people are like, so when did you know that Narset was going to become a Planeswalker? And I'm like, before just about anything, I knew Narset. Like, we knew very early on that once we had planned it, like Creative said, we really love this idea of one of the cons becomes a Planeswalker. And we had a gap because Venser was the white-blue Planeswalker, and he's no more, and so we like the idea of filling in that gap with a new white-blue Planeswalker. And so they actually kind of worked backwards. They knew they needed a white-blue Planeswalker, like, okay, well, there's one clear option because of the 5 wedges. Only one of them is white and blue. And so Narset, from almost the earliest version, we knew she was destined to become a Planeswalker.
So one of the most eye-catching things with Narset Transcendent, I think to a lot of people, is just her huge starting loyalty. This is something that she is sort of one of our initial experiments with having a Planeswalker with a higher loyalty that might sit on the board a little bit longer, might have a slightly less powerful effect than on some of the other Planeswalkers you've seen, where it's not necessarily I have to answer this immediately or I lose, but you know, this becomes a real choice of, do I go after the Planeswalker or do I go after the player? You know, I feel like Ashiok is also maybe in a somewhat similar space. So in general, we're going to do more experimentation with having Planeswalkers that have higher loyalties and aren't necessarily a must answer or must kill. I mean, you know, it might be worth knocking Narset down to the point where she can't use her rebound ability, but you get the idea.
Sarkhan, who has traveled the multiverse after leaving Tarkir, has finally returned, has finally created the world that he longed for, a world that was ruled by majestic dragons. And you can see he's no longer Sarkhan the Mad. Visually, he had horns, actually literal horns, coming off of his costuming in Khans of Tarkir, and now that's gone. Literally a weight has been lifted from his shoulders.
I've thrown aside my own past. I'm a curiosity now.
So Sarkhan Unbroken shows Sarkhan at a new reforged as a teamer shaman who still summons dragons, as you would always expect Sarkhan to do. We gave him a blue ability where he draws cards, gets mana, kind of combining blue and green and red. And we fit the card Dragonstorm in the set by putting it on Sarkhan's ultimate.
When we were making Khans of Tarkir and we knew we were doing dragons, we said, you know, what are the fun things we can do with all the timelines? You know, how can the Mighty Khan become someone who rings bells for a living, and how can we make all these cool changes? So one of the things that I felt really strong about is I said to the creative team, I go, here's just an ask from me. Something has to not change. Something, like, it doesn't matter. Like, Ugin's alive and dragons are alive, and to this one thing, it just doesn't matter. That its life is the same. And so Summit Prowler is that creature. It shows up in Khans of Tarkir, it shows up in Dragons of Tarkir. The Yeti's like, whatever. I'm a Yeti, I'm doing my thing. Now the funny thing is, it's the same art, except with dragons in the background. So it's like, it's slightly different. Like, okay, this Yeti lives in a world of dragons, or the other Yeti lived in a world without dragons. But you know what? The Yeti doesn't care. The Yeti, he just lives on.